I thought we were going to have a situation where we were going to be attacked. We attacked first, and if we didn't, it could have been, look, we're really decimating them.
Yesterday, you told us that Israel was going to strike Iran and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked a question.
No, were you the one that, because somebody asked me a question yesterday, did we go in because of Israel? And I said, you were asking me that follow-up. And I said, no. I told you this had to happen anyway. The president made a decision, and the decision he made was that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ballistic missile program, that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ability to conduct these attacks.
The lights are burning late in the Situation Rooms tonight, but the real story isn't on the flickering monitors or the official press releases being scrubbed by 3 different legal teams before they hit the wire. No, the real story is in the silence between the explosions. While the world watches the grainy night vision footage of Tehran lighting up like a funeral pyre, the whispers in the corridors of power are telling a much different tale. They want you to believe this is a surgical operation, a necessary correction to a global threat. But if you follow the money, the timing, and the terrifyingly convenient intelligence that dropped right before the first missile left the rail, you start to see the cracks in the porcelain. We're peeling back the layers on a conflict that was supposedly unavoidable, but looks more like a choreographed endgame every single hour. The part people always whisper about is the sheer, brutal efficiency of that first wave. We're told Israel launched these major airstrikes in Tehran because they had no choice, that it was a defensive reflex. But look at the geography. This wasn't just a strike, it was a regional reset. Expanding military operations into Lebanon at the exact same moment they were punching through the sophisticated air defenses of a sovereign capital thousands of miles away? That isn't reactionary, that's a roadmap being executed. What the official records won't show you is the level of coordination required to hit Iranian military infrastructure with that kind of precision while simultaneously lighting up the Levant. The insiders are calling it the Great Decapitation. They aren't just hitting missile silos, they are erasing the very nervous system of the Iranian state. But you have to ask yourself, who is cashing out here? When the dust settles and the regional power vacuum opens up, who's standing there with the keys? This isn't just about security, it's about dominance. It's about ensuring that for the next 50 years there is only one undisputed heavyweight in the Middle East. The defense narrative is just the PR coating on a very aggressive pill. Then you have President Trump stepping up to the podium, leaning into that familiar strongman cadence. He's defending the initiation of military action by claiming a preemptive strike prevented an imminent Iranian attack. It's a classic play. The word imminent is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card in international law. It's the ghost in the machine. If you say something was about to happen, you never have to prove it didn't because, well, you stopped it. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? What the Whisper Network is buzzing about is the lack of a smoking gun. We've seen this script before. 2003 called and it wants its justifications back. Is this a genuine move to save lives, or is it a play for the history books, a way to cement a legacy as the man who finally solved the Iran problem? The optics are curated to perfection, the commander-in-chief standing firm against the ticking clock. But in the back rooms, the conversation is about the January surprise. It's about a leader who knows that a nation at war rarely switches horses midstream. It's about the ultimate distraction from domestic fires by lighting an even bigger one abroad. Now watch the footwork of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He's out there doing the rounds, clarifying with a very pointed intensity that the decision to strike Iran was a cold, calculated U.S. strategic move, not something we were bullied into by Israeli pressure. He's trying to kill the narrative that the tail is wagging the dog. But why so defensive? If it was truly a joint strategic interest, you wouldn't need to protest so much about who was in the driver's seat. The insider take? This is a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of American agency. The administration knows the optics of being seen as a secondary player in a Middle Eastern war are toxic. By framing it as a sovereign, strategic decision, they are trying to bypass the foreign influence critics. But look at the board. The strikes serve a very specific, very localized Israeli security agenda. Rubio is out there trying to sell a Made in America label on a conflict that has Tel Aviv written all over the logistics. Are we really supposed to buy the narrative that we just happened to find the exact same strategic necessity at the exact same second our closest ally did? It's a calculated move to protect the administration's America First branding while they deep dive into a coalition-first war. While the bombs fall, the suits on Capitol Hill are doing what they do best, performative outrage. U.S. lawmakers are sharply divided along party lines over the legality and necessity of the action. It's a beautifully choreographed shadow box. One side screams constitutional crisis, the other screams national security, and in the end, the checks are still signed and the munitions are still shipped. The part that the gatekeepers don't want you to focus on is that this division is a feature, not a bug. It provides the necessary friction to make the process look democratic, while the executive branch does exactly what it wants. Look at the donor lists. The same defense contractors are funding both sides of the aisle. Whether a congressman is for or against the strike, their portfolio is likely green today. Is this a genuine debate about the soul of the republic, or is it just a way to keep the base riled up while the deep state infrastructure hums along undisturbed? The legality is a moving target, and as long as they're arguing about the law, they're not talking about the results. The Democrats are pushing a war powers resolution to restrict extended military engagement without congressional approval. It sounds noble, doesn't it? A return to balance. But here's the whisper truth. The War Powers Act is a paper tiger. By the time the resolution is debated, amended, voted on, and inevitably vetoed or bypassed, the extended engagement is already an accomplished fact. This is about PR disaster management. It's a way for the opposition to say, "We tried," without actually stopping the gears of the war machine. It's a calculated move to gather donations and keep the anti-war wing of the party from jumping ship. If they were serious about stopping the war, they'd be talking about the power of the purse, cutting off the actual funding. But notice they aren't. They're talking about resolutions and consultations. It's theater for the masses while the script has already been written by the Pentagon. Tehran isn't just taking this lying down, but their response tells a story of its own. Reports of Iranian drone strikes hitting CIA-linked sites in Iraq and Saudi Arabia are filtering through the noise. This is where it gets messy. Why those sites? Why now? The official line is regional escalation, but the whisper in the intelligence community is that these weren't random retaliations. They were targeted hits on the ghost stations that coordinate the very surveillance making the Israeli strikes so effective. This is the money trail logic at work in reverse. Iran is trying to drive up the cost of the war for the U.S. By hitting sites in Saudi Arabia, they are threatening the very stability of the global oil market and the security of the U.S.'s most lucrative partners. It's a message. If we go down, the energy grid goes with us. Are we really supposed to believe our CIA-linked sites are just duck sittings? Or is this part of a larger, more terrifying game of controlled escalation where both sides know exactly which pawns they are willing to sacrifice? The images coming from Tehran are haunting. The capital is nearly deserted. The population has fled, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell of a city. The official narrative focuses on the rising civilian death toll, framing it as a tragic necessity of war. But the darker interpretation is much more calculated. This isn't just about hitting military targets. It's about psychological displacement. If you empty a capital, you break the spirit of a nation. You turn a modern superpower into a refugee crisis overnight. The insiders are watching the real estate values and the infrastructure collapse, knowing that a deserted city is much easier to reorganize than a populated one. What the official records won't show you is the intentionality behind the terror. They want the world to see the empty streets as a sign of Iranian weakness, but it's a sign of a civilian population that knows the surgical strike narrative is a lie. They know the bombs don't check ID cards. The numbers are starting to normalize, which is the most terrifying part of all. Nearly 1,000 deaths reported in Iran following these intensified strikes. The military command structure is the official target, but 1,000 bodies suggests a much wider net. In the halls of power, this is just collateral damage. It's a statistic to be managed. But who is cashing out on this human cost? Every death is a radicalization point, a reason for the forever war to keep spinning its wheels. Is this a move to end the threat, or is it to ensure that the threat remains viable enough to justify emergency budgets for the next decade? They call it degrading the enemy's capacities, but what they're really doing is harvesting a new crop of resentment that will fuel the defense industry for a generation. It's a cycle of violence that pays dividends to the people who never have to set foot in the deserted capital. Back home, the mood is sour. Americans remain skeptical. Polling shows that most believe the goals of this war haven't been clearly explained. They're right. We've been told it's about preemption, strategy, and defense, but none of it sticks. People are looking at their grocery bills and then looking at the cost of a Tomahawk missile and doing the math. The whisper network here is that the administration doesn't care about the skepticism. They only care about the apathy. As long as the public is confused, they won't act. The lack of a clear objective isn't a mistake, it's a strategy. If you don't define victory, you can never truly lose, and you can keep the operation running as long as the interest rates allow. They are banking on the fact that the average person is too tired, too broke, and too distracted to demand the real why. Finally, we get to the real reveal, the one they definitely don't want you to talk about. This conflict threatens global economic stability, specifically China's energy supply. China is heavily dependent on Iranian oil. By lighting up Tehran,